As we continue discussing and preparing for the big game on Saturday night against Notre Dame, we must discuss the recruits that'll be in the house for the big game. Numerous players from the classes of 2023, 2024, and 2025 will be in the house. Who will be there? What could come from these players being in the horseshoe for such a big game? We'll discuss that and a whole lot more today on Locked on Buckeyes.
You are Locked on Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked on Buckeyes for the Locked on Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Wednesday, August 31st in the year 2022, and I want to thank you for making Locked on Buckeyes your first listen or first watch of every single day. On today's episode, we will be joined by John Garcia Jr. John is the director of football recruiting at Sports Illustrated and Locked On's football recruiting insider, as John and I discuss the recruits that'll be in the house, the horseshoe this weekend for the primetime game against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. John and I also discuss our general excitement for this weekend and for college football to be back. We also discuss what could come. Could players commit after this big game? And there's a lot of emotion thrown into visiting the horseshoe for the season opener. Man, this is bigger. I feel it. I hope you feel it as well. But there's another storyline here that we want to hit on, and it is the high school players that might play in Columbus in the future. We all love John Garcia Jr. He is back today, and I'm sure you will love what he has to say. And as we welcome in John Garcia Jr. back with us once again, I'd like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Last week, we got week 0 games. We got Nebraska doing Nebraska things under Scott Frost, Northwestern winning that game over on the other side of the water, other side of the pond. But we got some week 0 games that were fun. College football was back in a little bit of an appetizer or a teaser for what this week is going to be. Thursday through Monday, games every night, games all day on Saturday. And John, I'm excited for college football. I'm excited for this Ohio State Notre Dame matchup. I'm excited for that, but just football being back in general, man, it's a great thing for everyone involved.
Yeah, it's a huge relief, Jay. Obviously, the offseason buildup, it gets to a boiling point, right? The crazy takes, the stuff we focus on. You know, I live down in Florida, so seeing these University of Florida and Miami fans going back and forth on like our first-year coach is better and our locker rooms are better, you know, just a bunch of garbage in the offseason. Let's get to the games, 11 on 11, full pads, and let the scoreboard and the records, tell us the story as opposed to the emotional side of it. But that's what makes college football great. So it's a nice combination and melting pot of all of these different things, but obviously excited to get to week 1. Like you said, Thursday through Saturday. I mean, it's like couch lock mode. Don't call me, don't text me. This is what we're doing.
Yeah, don't call, don't text. Make sure you have all the food there, or hit up DoorDash or Uber Eats or whoever you want to hit up to bring the food to you. This weekend's big, but I think for Ohio State fans, I know for Ohio State fans, this season opener is going to hit a little bit different. Top 5 matchup in prime time on ABC, 7:30 p.m. Get there to your television, be in your spot. You're facing one of those teams that when you look at their helmet, you know who it is. You know what they mean to the sport of college football. And Notre Dame doesn't come to Columbus very much. I believe this is the 7th meeting all time, including bowl games, regular season matchups, all time between these two schools that geographically aren't that far apart. So I'm excited for not only this weekend of college football, but for these two powers in the sport to meet on Saturday night.
Yeah, and like you said, it hits different when it's not a neutral site. This has all the makings of a neutral site game, right? Put it at the, Chicago Bears Stadium or wherever you want, the Bengals, Browns, wherever, and just let it be an NFL type of game. But I love the fact that this is at the Horseshoe. You'll return the favor and go to Notre Dame. I mean, I think that is the essence of college football. And for both programs, it really shows some mettle, right? Like, I'm willing to play the best wherever, including at their place. So I think this says a lot about both OSU and Notre Dame in that respect. But yeah, top 5 type matchup, a ton of storylines, a ton of NFL draft picks will be playing in this game. And obviously the whole Marcus Freeman deal, first-year coach at Notre Dame, a former Ohio State great on top of that. There's so many great storylines to dig into. So very fitting that this is the game, right? In a week 1 that is really great, right? Backyard brawl, Georgia, Oregon. I mean, Arkansas, Cincinnati is like my sleeper game. That's going to be old school Big Ten or SEC type football. But for this to be the game, Ohio State and Notre Dame, it's incredibly fitting for that to be the nightcap, the prime timer, and I couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, man, it's a great way to end the day with that game at night. I know in the offseason, some Ohio State fans were really wondering, will this game be on Fox at 12 noon or will it be on ABC in prime time? And in my mind, I'm thinking there's no way ABC and ESPN let this game go to Fox to where they can't capitalize on this big game, because next year, I believe the game's going to be at Notre Dame, which is an NBC product. And so
Right.
ESPN can't get that game next year. And so ESPN knows this is the one time we can get these two schools on our network, maybe ABC, more eyeballs. It's perfect. It's perfect for everybody involved. And I've been looking forward to this one for quite a long time. You mentioned something. I just want to get your thoughts quickly on something you briefly touched on, which was it not being not a non-conference game, with it not being a neutral site game. It's a home game for Ohio State next year, a home game for Notre Dame. We've seen a lot of neutral site games over the past 10 years, and you mentioned maybe Soldier Field or another place where it could literally be a neutral site, but still in a general geographically still inside the Midwest. I like that it's at home. There are people out there that still like that think it should be a neutral site game, but you kind of like it's that the home environment, home field for both schools in back-to-back years. Why is that?
Because it tells you more about both teams, and the team, if the road team can come in and get a win, it tells you even more, because you are not only – it's like when Oregon beat Ohio State last year. How much hype came out of that because the Ducks went to Columbus and did what they had to do, and they just became elevated because it was like you didn't just go to a neutral site. You went to their place and beat them. So I just think it brings more clout for when you do pull off an upset, or conversely, it says a lot about the willingness to go to their place the following year. So I just think it's the essence of college football. We got plenty of neutral site games already. All of bowl season is basically neutral sites anyway. The playoff, if it expands, that'll be even more. We got plenty of that. But I think the kind of traditional, classic passion, pageantry, even hate that comes out of these home and homes is something that, again, resonates with college football. Everybody knows football is king in this country. NFL and college 1-2. But the major difference between the two is that passion. It is that energy. It is that this is my school mentality, as opposed to the NFL, where it's a little bit more player driven, money driven. It's just a little bit of a different vibe professionally. So that college pop that exists, really shines brightest when you're at the university and at these on-campus, these amazing and bigger stadiums that hold more people. So it's louder, it's more passionate, it's more energetic, it's a better television product. It's certainly a better in-person product as well. So I'm all for these true home and homes and the programs that have the you-know-what to schedule them against big-time teams. Absolutely. And you get more benefit of the doubt too, right? Because now – the playoff, all the individual awards, all that stuff, humans are doing that. No more BCS, right? So humans are doing that. So all things even if you take a loss here, if you're Ohio State, the willingness to play this home and home, I think, creates some benefit of the doubt, especially doing so in week 1, right out of the gate. No cupcake, directional school early on, straight into the mix with the biggest, baddest brands in the sport. And I think that creates a benefit of the doubt that will help you long term when those rankings come out and obviously become finalized after Thanksgiving.
We are here with John Garcia Jr. He is the director of football recruiting at Sports Illustrated and Locked On's Football Recruiting Insider. This is Locked On Buckeyes. John and I really had a fun time talking about the excitement about this weekend. Ohio State, Notre Dame. John did a phenomenal job of discussing the importance of the home and home series. Ohio State and Notre Dame scheduled this year and then next year. But also for this year's game in a few days, John, it's going to be a big recruiting weekend. As you're going to get a lot of guys that have already verbally committed to Ohio State coming to the campus. 2023 class guys. You're also going to get some 2024 recruits, 2025 recruits that'll all be in the horseshoe for this weekend. And so as big as this game is for the fans and people like you and I, who love this sport, not just college football, but football in general, you're also going to get a lot of guys that are really going to be recruiting other recruits this weekend in the horseshoe. And so, John, I love this part of the storylines you mentioned earlier. Here's one. You're going to have 3 guys who are not committed to Ohio State, not committed anywhere, that are going to be in the horseshoe. Keon Keeley, Matayo Uiagalelei, and then Damon Wilson will all be in there looking to see, is this a place for me? Is this the right field for me? Is the vibe in the horseshoe for me? Big recruiting weekend. It's another storyline, John, for people like us to talk about to build up this game.
Yeah, and I think that's where, again, the home stadium versus neutral site, it's not even close when it comes to from a recruiting perspective. And now neutral sites, both teams do get a little bit of an allotment to host kids, but they cannot communicate with those recruits. So you're just inviting them to watch the game, which is still good, but not great. But when it's at your campus, all bets are off. Staff can communicate. You can spend more time. You can feed them. You can really recruit the kids that you want on campus. But like you said, the key for this weekend for OSU, with as good a visitor list as I've ever seen in over a decade doing this, the key is that a lot of commitments will be in town to help peer recruit those kids that are uncommitted. Because there's only so much time Ryan Day and Larry Johnson and Knowles and all these guys are going to have with the recruits, because look, you got to win a game on Saturday, right? Pretty big game.
Right.
You got to get the injury report straight, finish up the game planning, make sure you have your availability. Hey, who's ready to go? How you in your rotations? Got to figure out all the on-field stuff. So the committed recruits, you're kind of, rallying around one another to recruit these guys, I think says a whole lot about how this weekend may ultimately play out. To my knowledge, none of these trips are official visits from these uncommitted guys, Keeley, Uiagalelei, and Damon Wilson. So it means you're going to basically build around the game itself. And that's where a lot of the verbal commitments will play a huge role. You naturally look at the quarterback, Brock Glenn. How is he going to communicate that message? You just assume those are the best communicators. And I know Brock personally, he's a great communicator who I'm sure will be all over these guys. But I think what's interesting, you have other Californians that will be there that can rally around Uiagalelei. And then Keeley and Wilson are from Florida, where we've talked about Ohio State making such a splash in this class of 2023. And a lot of these Floridians, Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate, Mark Fletcher, Bryson Rogers, these guys are going to be in the horseshoe as well. And Ennis in particular has been as vocal as any current Buckeye commitment in rallying and adding to this commitment list and recruiting for the Bucks. So I think a nationally known name, heck, number 1 receiver in the country for us at Sports Illustrated, a guy like that galvanizing other uncommitted recruits where he's been there, he's done that, he's been in your shoes as a truly coveted prospect, really elevates how much these uncommitted guys could resonate with another recruit. So I think that's a true extension of the coaching staff and about as good and ideal a scenario as Ohio State fans could have hoped for, with the stage, the setting, and just this kind of national desire for these top recruits to get to Columbus. How many Floridians are going to be making this trip? It's like double digits. I mean, it's unbelievable to see that when official visits are not a part of that equation and the school's not footing the bill there. So really fascinating to see the buildup here. And clearly it's trickled all the way down to recruiting, because there is a fever pitch type of energy to get to this game on Saturday night.
John, when Dylan Raiola committed to Ohio State, it was very apparent on Twitter that he was not going to shy away from trying to connect with other recruits, guys that hadn't committed yet, via social media. And I don't know, I haven't seen the official list or an updated list like you have. Is Raiola scheduled to be there this weekend?
He is, and he's not the only elite 2024 guy that is expected, even on offense, right? We talked about the Floridians coming. I mean, Josiah Trader, Jeremiah Smith are teammates at Chaminade Madonna, where Kenyatta Jackson was signed last year as an SI 99 recruit. So those receivers will be there. You imagine that relationship with Raiola cannot hurt. And then there's a lot of top uncommitted players. KJ Bolden's a two-way star from Georgia in 2024 who will be there. Sammy Brown's a big-time linebacker who will be there. The list, even if you just isolated 2024, Ryan Wingo's another great receiver expected, just the 2024 list would be impressive. And you would say, man, the Buckeyes are turning the page here at the right time. And by the way, September 1st is the first day schools can reach out to the class of 24. So again, that's lining up pretty nicely for the Bucks because they're going to reach out to these 24 players and then they're going to be on campus a couple days later. So that lines up really well. But just this 24 list is as impressive as other schools' class of 2023 visitor list. And again, we talked about how big this weekend is. Florida, Utah should be fun. Cincinnati, Arkansas, some big neutral site games. I mean, Florida State, LSU, nobody's even talking about that.
Right.
Imagine the visitors going to these games, yet Ohio State's 2024 list is just as impressive, if not more impressive, than the class of 2023 recruits that are heading to some of these other games. That's how gaudy and how much it's growing in terms of this recruiting visitor list, expected visitor list, as we should say, for Ohio State, Notre Dame. It's truly remarkable. I think if you snapshot this list, right, let's say it's 45 kids or whatever, snapshot that and then look at signing day this year and then look at signing day next year, how many Buckeyes will have been on campus for this game? You got to feel like half of the 24 class and almost all of the 23 class, when the dust settles, will have been in town together on Saturday. Something very hard to duplicate and very hard to kind of see through. But Ohio State's one of those programs that gets the benefit of the doubt in trying to do so.
Notre Dame had a game, I want to say a couple of years ago, maybe 3 now, where they hosted Clemson.
Yeah.
But it was more of a conference game. But still, to me, Notre Dame ACC 5 games, I still view that as a non-conference, even though it's like technically there's a conference. I think they get like $10 million from that deal just on the football side of things. So they're getting money there from that. But at this time, they were able to host and bring in some of these big-time recruits for that big stage. It was a primetime game on NBC. I remember it because Ohio State actually had a game at that same time. So I couldn't go back and forth and try to watch that game and then watch the Ohio State game as well. But when I talk about like these big games where you get these big-time matchups, which aren't normal, home-and-home type of deals, we're used to getting recruits. But you mentioned earlier how big the 2024 recruiting visit group is for this game. Is it normal for schools to have this many recruits from 2 back-to-back classes on campus at the same time?
In terms of volume, yes, it's typical, but in terms of star power, of course not. This is not something that really any program is able to put together without, one, being highly thought of on your own, and two, again, having that marquee opponent where the game is hyped and people want to see it. You think of even just the best atmospheres in the Big Ten, right? Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan, etc. Those stadiums are well known and loud and all that stuff when they've got a rival or they've got a big time opponent coming in. So you have to have kind of that whole formula to bring it out. And I think the game being in the evening absolutely helps you here because a lot of these kids we're talking about are not Midwest kids.
Right.
They're making the trek from further away. And again, high school football's here, right? So they're playing on Friday night and then either jumping on a plane or getting in the car pretty soon after that, maybe a quick nap and meal in between, and they're hitting the road to Columbus. So there's not a whole lot of time, less than 24 hours between the end of their game and the start of the Buckeyes game. So I think that later window also helps you to have more big-time recruits on campus because if this was a noon kickoff, like you talked about maybe being because of the Fox deal, I think that would have hurt the out-of-state and national reach of this game from a visitor's perspective. But because it's so well hyped and built up and it's later, you get that nice stars aligning feel where everybody and their mother wants to get to this game and they can kind of make it happen with the planning that it takes in between their games ending on Friday night and this game starting on Saturday night. So all the stars have aligned for this game. So it's really hard for any program, and this is all season now. It's going to be hard for any program to match this volume of star power when it comes to a normal regular season game. And again, I think that's all the advantages of trying to line these up because you want good on good, and you want to sell that product that you've been talking about all offseason to these kids. You want to sell it in person against a marquee opponent. It's easy to go beat up on Charleston Southern, no disrespect to the Buccaneers there, but it's a little bit different when you do so against a Notre Dame, and the spread is obviously very much leaning towards the Buckeyes in this matchup. So I think all of that aligns really well for Ohio State, and it's not something we're likely to see duplicated more than a time or two by any program the rest of this year.
Well, John, you also mentioned there's another factor that's going into all this as well. Not just the time of the game, but the weekend that the game is being played. It's Labor Day weekend. These kids don't have school on Monday, and the parents know that they have extra time to get the youngster to Columbus, say they're from South Florida or Southern California, wherever they're coming from. They can get to Columbus, and then they don't have to rush to come back to get ready for school on Monday. They can get back home maybe on Sunday evening, but they have Monday to relax. So that's another factor there that just popped into my head as you're talking about different factors of the weekend. Remember, last year it was Georgia-Clemson, but that was a neutral site game. So the home and home feel, that's not there at all. But John, I want to end with this. I mentioned Keon Keeley, decommitted from Notre Dame recently, going to be in the horseshoe over the weekend. Matayo Uiagalelei took an official visit to Ohio State over the summer. I think I talked to you after that visit and talked about how his dad was all over Twitter, just letting everybody know how good of a time he was having there in Columbus. And then Damon Wilson down there where I think Venice is down where you currently live now. Another really talented edge defender, defensive end guy out there. With all three of these guys being on campus, and if Buckeye fans would love to have all the talent in Columbus, do you think one of them commits to Ohio State shortly after this game is played?
That's a great question, and it's tough. I mean, on one hand, first of all, it's a huge position of need, right? We've talked about this together. Ohio State has hit the mark at so many positions, best wide receiver class in the country, developing one of the better DB hauls in the country. You got your quarterback in Brock Glenn. Everything is lining up for an elite, potentially number one class. But the glaring hole is edge rusher. So that factored in with Larry Johnson, who's one of the best edge rusher recruiters the game has ever seen. And these three big names, all elite SI 99 recruits, top 40 guys, and top 5 or 6 edges in respectively, that combination you feel like will yield to something. But the question is when. And I think that's a great question, Jay, because, again, on the one hand, these guys are all experienced in the recruiting process, right? Uiagalelei has been doing it since he was a freshman.
Right.
Keeley since he was a sophomore. Damon Wilson's a little bit newer to the scene, maybe the last 12 to 18 months at the most. But all three are so coveted, right? Uiagalelei's got Clemson, USC, Oregon, Alabama in the mix. Keeley's got Alabama and Florida trying to keep him down in SEC country, in addition to Ohio State and others trying to get in the mix. Although it does look like Notre Dame is totally out at this point, which is very interesting because he's going to watch Notre Dame play Ohio State here in just a couple of days. And then Wilson, it's kind of a Miami-Alabama battle. Ohio State is now trying to step in. Texas is a school he's never been to that he wants to get to. So it's the combination of other schools recruiting these guys and other visits that are very likely to happen down the line tells you it's less likely something will happen. But again, these are teenagers. The atmosphere, we've been talking about it all day. The atmosphere will be crazy. Ohio State is expected to win. If they do win, this pass rush will play a part. These kids are going to get time with Ryan Day, time with Larry Johnson, time with the current Buckeyes that are getting after the passer. And kind of collectively, emotionally, you could understand if one of these guys was like, you know what, I'm shutting it down. If that was the case, I would probably put some fake dollars on Uiagalelei between the three, only because he's the most well-traveled and he's been recruited the longest. So he kind of knows what he's getting no matter where he goes. He's already been to all these places. He kind of knows the deal. I think he could be the closest internally to making a decision. So if I had to gamble, I'd put some fake dollars on him doing so emotionally. But again, these kids are all highly coveted, all national recruits, all very, very much experienced in this process. So that typically slows down the timeline and pushes things closer to the winter months or even signing day come mid-December. But again, stranger things have happened. We didn't expect Ohio State to land these 3 elite receivers back to back to back earlier this summer.
Right.
So you would imagine some things start to align. And again, it's a huge position of need. So you know from the Ohio State perspective that red carpet will be rolled out. The communication between the coaching staff and these recruits, these defensive ends in particular, about how high on the board they are, how much of a priority they are. Again, we told you, if Desmond Umeozulu picks South Carolina, it tells you Ohio State's feeling pretty good about at least 1 or 2 of these top uncommitted guys. He picked South Carolina the other day. So Ohio State is going to be pushing all its chips, theoretically, into these 3 defensive ends. If you can get 1 or 2, you've got a shot at the number 1 class in the country, and you fill a big need in the process. That will all be communicated in person over the next couple of days, and that's something that is invaluable in that pursuit because of the dead periods and the build up to the season. There's been no in-person contact since the very end of July. So you're talking over a month at this point to teenagers that are impressionable. So it is something to keep an eye on, although it is not necessarily expected.
John, it's fun having you on, man. I'm excited for football. I can tell you are as well. College football is my time of year. I like high school football too. People know, they follow me on Twitter. I like the high school football, go to games all the time, but college football just hits a little bit different, especially when Ohio State is playing Notre Dame to open the season. John, if you could, let everyone know where they can follow you on Twitter. And you mentioned before we started recording, you mentioned you guys just dropped something at SI. Could you talk about that and tell people where they can check that out as well?
Yeah, follow me on social, John Garcia _JR. And yeah, our top prospect rankings are out. It's called the SI 99. It's just the 99 best players in the country. And yes, Uiagalelei and Wilson and Keeley are very much high on that list. Keeley, number 3 overall recruit in the United States for us. So obviously a big deal to get him on campus after that Notre Dame decommitment. Check out that. We'll update our team recruiting rankings here soon in early September as well. All for you right there at sportsillustrated.com.
And guys, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. Send all of your emails to jstevens317 at gmail.com. We are just a few days away from the season opener. One of the biggest games of the weekend, if not the biggest game of the weekend. I'm glad John can help us get ready and add another storyline to this big matchup in primetime on ABC Saturday night. We're out of here for the day, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.